When holding on creates distance, Buddha's teaching on fear and attachment. I used to believe that love needed my constant attention to survive. If I stayed alert, if I held it carefully enough, nothing would slip away. Only later did I begin to notice how much tension was hidden inside that care. The leaning heart. You may recognize this feeling without needing to name it. The quiet leaning forward of the heart, the subtle readiness to adjust, to monitor, to stay alert. Love feels precious, so attention stays sharp. Small shifts matter. Tone, timing, silence, each becomes meaningful. Not because something is wrong, but because something might be. The Buddha noticed this movement of mind long before it was called anxiety. He saw how care quietly turns into vigilance, and how vigilance tightens the body and narrows perception. When love is watched too closely, the present moment becomes a checkpoint instead of a meeting place. What was meant to protect connection begins to strain it, like holding a bird too firmly out of fear it might fly away. When care becomes control. At first, it feels responsible, attentive, even loving. You tell yourself that closeness requires effort, that awareness prevents loss. Yet the mind stays busy, scanning for signs, rehearsing conversations that haven't happened, preparing for outcomes that may never arrive. Restlessness settles in, thin but constant. The Buddha's way of seeing does not condemn this. It simply points. He noticed how the wish for safety quietly turns into the wish to manage life. Control disguises itself as care, but the body knows the difference. One feels warm and open. The other feels tight, alert, slightly braced, like holding your breath while pretending to relax. The weight of expectation. Suffering grows where grasping imagines permanence. Unspoken rules begin to form. You should reassure me. You should stay the same. You should protect what I feel. None of this is said aloud, yet it hums beneath interactions. When these expectations aren't met, disappointment appears not because harm occurred, but because an imagined future collapsed. The Buddha understood expectation as a subtle form of attachment. Not attachment to a person, but to an outcome, a feeling, a sense of certainty. Love becomes conditional without meaning to. Warmth depends on stability. Joy rises and falls with reassurance. What was fluid becomes managed, and the heart grows tired from the effort of holding everything together. Tension in the space between. Relationships begin to feel monitored. Conversations carry strategy. Honesty feels risky because it might disturb balance. Feelings are held back to preserve peace, or released suddenly when pressure builds. Intimacy weakens not from lack of care, but from lack of safety. The Buddha saw that fear of loss creates the very distance it tries to prevent. Like gripping water, the tighter the hold, the less remains. Pressure invites resistance. Attention narrows, and presence thins. The other person feels it, even if nothing is spoken. Something essential, the ease of being, starts to fade. The quiet recognition. Over time, something begins to dawn. Much of what felt like love was actually anxiety leaning into the future. Energy was spent preventing loss rather than meeting what was already here. This recognition doesn't arrive dramatically. It comes as a small relief, a soft exhale. The Buddha taught through observation, not instruction. He trusted that when the mind sees clearly, it naturally releases. Detachment begins here not as withdrawal, but as honesty. You notice the strain. You feel the cost. And without forcing change, something loosens. Fear loses a little of its authority. Space without threat. What is allowed to change no longer needs guarding. As control softens, something unexpected happens. Space becomes safe. Silence no longer signals danger. Independence stops meaning distance. Curiosity returns, gentle and open. Listening deepens because it no longer searches for reassurance. The Buddha understood space as essential to freedom, not distance, but room to breathe. When pressure lifts, trust grows not because certainty appears, but because resilience does. Love feels lighter, not weaker, but steadier. It no longer needs to prove itself moment by moment. The paradox of holding. There is a quiet paradox the Buddha often pointed toward. The tighter something is held, the more tense it becomes. When pressure eases, ease returns. What is forced begins to resist. What is allowed often stays. Holding tightly signals mistrust. Releasing signals safety. And safety invites presence. This is not a strategy, but a natural response. Like a tree that bends with the wind instead of snapping, the heart learns to stay open by not insisting on stillness. Beyond relationships. This truth does not belong only to love. Joy fades under surveillance, but returns when allowed to come and go. Creativity vanishes under pressure, but flows in freedom. Emotions soften when permitted to move. Thoughts quiet when no longer fought. The Buddha saw one pattern moving through all of this. Life responds better to effort without demand than to control disguised as care. Right effort is alignment, not force. It is participation without gripping, engagement without ownership. The mind rests when it stops trying to secure what cannot be secured. Impermanence Revisited. Change is not the problem, resistance is. Gradually, impermanence stops feeling like a threat. Change is no longer an interruption. It becomes continuity. Stability shifts inward not as sameness, but as the ability to remain present while things move. The Buddha did not promise permanence. He offered clarity. When expectation aligns with reality, anxiety dissolves. The nervous system rests. Attention widens. You begin to trust timing, not because it always pleases you, but because you no longer fight its nature. The past loosens its grip. With this alignment, the past begins to surface not to haunt, but to be released. Regret had been anchoring attention to moments that could not respond. Detachment loosens the demand that the past be different. The Buddha understood regret as attachment to an alternate reality. One judged by hindsight, replayed with self-blame. When seen clearly, its grip softens. Memory becomes informative instead of punishing. Lessons remain. Self-attack fades. Energy returns to now. Identity softens. You may notice something subtle here. As regret loosens, identity softens. You are no longer defined by mistakes, but shaped by understanding. What happened is complete. It no longer requires resistance. The Buddha pointed to this gently. The self is not a fixed story, but a movement of conditions. When those conditions are understood, the story relaxes. Compassion replaces blame. Acceptance replaces replay. There is less need to defend who you were, because you are no longer trapped there. Love at rest. When grasping ends, care remains. As fear recedes, love rests, not as a shield against loss, but as presence within change. Care remains. Attention remains. What dissolves is the demand that love guarantee permanence to feel real. The Buddha's insight lives here quietly. Love does not need to freeze time to be true. It lives fully in moments without gripping them. It trusts movement. It meets what is here and lets what passes pass. Warmth without tension. What remains feels different in the body. Warmth without tension. Depth without urgency. Stability without stillness. Life continues to move, but the bracing has stopped. You may still care deeply. You may still choose, commit, show up. The difference is internal. You are no longer leaning forward, guarding the future. You are standing where you are, meeting what arrives. The Buddha called this freedom, not escape, but intimacy without fear. Moving with life. There is a quiet intelligence in this way of living. Effort without strain. Attention without control. Love without management. You move with life instead of against it. The Buddha never asked for withdrawal from the world. He asked for clear seeing. When seeing is clear, movement becomes harmonious. You respond instead of react. You participate without gripping, and life, sensing no resistance, flows more naturally through you. What was never lost? Nothing true requires holding. In the end, you may realize that what you feared losing was never secured by vigilance, and what remains was never threatened by release. Love did not disappear when control softened. It clarified. Presence did not weaken when certainty dissolved. It deepened. Freedom arose not from forcing life to change, but from seeing clearly and moving in harmony with what is. What was never meant to stay did not need guarding. What was real did not need holding. This is Buddha Reflections, where philosophy, insight, and lived experience meet to explore mind, impermanence, and release. Thanks for your time. It's been a delight. What should we explore next? Comment, share, and save your insight. Subscribe to Orbital Dharma and keep your thoughts bright.